Thank you for joining us tonight for the closing session of the Ethics After the Holocaust Conference. Before we begin, let me say a word about how we will be handling questions. If you have a question, please write it down on the card and pass it to the aisle, and Usher will collect it there. And now on to more interesting matters. It is my pleasure to introduce the President of the University of Oregon, Dave Frohmeyer. President Frohmeyer's enthusiastic support of this conference has been vital to its success. He has empowered a talented team of faculty, staff, and students to pursue their vision and make it reality. As a state legislator, attorney general, dean of the UO Law School, and now as the president of the university, Dave Frohmeyer has brought with him a commitment to the pursuit of ethics that we have explored this week. Thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening, President Frohmeyer.
Thank you very much, Will. Ladies and gentlemen, the attendance tonight, which is awesome and overwhelming, is testament to the importance of this conference and to the particular privilege and honor it is of the University of Oregon to host an event that is crucial to address one of the critical ethical questions of our time, that of ethics after the Holocaust. Even to speak of the Holocaust as the topic of a conference somehow seems, in my own mind, almost to trivialize it, because the presence of the Holocaust in our history poses deeper questions than probably can be answered to our minds alone. It provides more disturbing insights into human nature, into the nature of evil, and into the nature of unspeakable agony than any we might care to explore or that we have the capacity to understand. But if we have that capacity, it is due to the intellect, the power, the compassion, the conscience of those who have appeared through the course of this week, and I speak especially of all of those who have joined us, and of course of our keynote speaker this evening, in whose life and humanity exist lessons that all of us must take to heart. It's been suggested that the role of history is not to show us how to control the world, but to enable us to enlarge, deepen, and discipline ourselves. That is our profound hope. And what truth there is to that role of history has been brought to us vividly, creatively, truthfully, for the past 40 years by the life and the words of Elie Wiesel. But before this distinguished guest is presented, it is my honor to introduce the man who's been instrumental among many in helping to make this evening's events and the events around which this evening is focused possible. David Stern serves as a trustee of the University of Oregon Foundation. He has served as a guiding light on the board of the University of Oregon Humanities Center, which has been central to the organization and inspiration and vision for this event. He is a prominent Portland business person, a civic leader, and received the University of Oregon's Distinguished Service Award at the 1995 commencement. A major financial commitment by David Stern and his wife, Nancy Gateau, has helped the Humanities Center to build upon the accomplishments of this conference. David and Nancy are endowing the Zedek Lectureship, which hereafter will support visiting scholars who, in the spirit of the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, address issues of personal ethical responsibility. That philosopher, Emmanuel Levinas, has said that a society is a gathering together of those who will speak and those who will listen. In anticipation of both, it is my great pleasure now to introduce David Stern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President Frohmeyer. Suffering confers neither privileges nor rights. All depends on how one uses it, says Elie Wiesel, son of Shlomo, father of Elisha, Hasidic Jew, uprooted adolescent of Siget, Transylvania, orphaned Auschwitz survivor, 1986 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, and Andrew W. Mellon Professor in the Humanities and University Professor at Boston University. Elie Wiesel has used his suffering, his faith, his memory, his silence, his way with words, to pray and to study, to witness and to testify, to disturb and to warn, to teach and to question himself and us about evil, silence, indifference, and inertia that today infect us and yesterday permitted Nazis to exterminate 6 million Jewish souls, 1.5 million children among them, and countless others. Why were those trains allowed to roll unhindered into Poland, he asks, in All Rivers Run to the Sea? Why were the tracks leading to Birkenau never bombed? That not a single Allied military aircraft ever tried to destroy the rail lines converging on Auschwitz remains an outrageous enigma. Where was God in all this? He asks in his Nobel lecture. It seemed as impossible to conceive of Auschwitz with God as to conceive of Auschwitz without God. Was Auschwitz a consequence of civilization, or was it an aberration? He continues, all we know is that Auschwitz called that civilization into question, as it called into question everything that preceded Auschwitz. From the kingdom of night, from the kingdom of memory, Elie Wiesel has pursued, in his words, the mystery that lies within knowledge and the darkness hidden within light. More than 35 books are products of his pursuit, as is such recognition as the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the U.S. Congressional Gold Medal and Medal of Liberty Award, and the rank of Grand Officer in the French Legion of Honor. After the whirlwind, after the slaughter, suffering unspeakably, what balm can we apply? Jewish tradition teaches that to love thy neighbor as thyself, to welcome the stranger, to look into the face of the other, is to come closer to God's presence. Significantly, Elie Wiesel and his wife Marion established in 1986 the Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity to advance human rights and peace by creating a forum to discuss urgent ethical issues. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our forum our distinguished guest, extraordinary teacher, masterful storyteller, and inspirational friend, Mr. Elie Wiesel.
President Fromeyer, David, William Berkowitz, my very distinguished colleagues and friends from so many years, good members of the faculty and students, I'll read to you a poem. The poem was written by an Israeli named Dan Pagis. He was born in Romania, went through the terrible times in Transnistria, died a few years ago of cancer. In Hebrew it reads, Katuv beiparon bakaron hechatum, written in pencil in the sealed freight car. Kan v'mishloach hazeh, here in this car, Ani Chava, I Eve, im hevel beni, with my son Abel. Im tiru et beni hagadol, should you see my older boy, Cain, the son of man, Cain ben Adam. Tagidu lo she'ani, tell him that I, here the poem ends. Tell him what? Where? When? The poet leaves the sentence open, as an open wound. And we will never know what the poor mother alone with her younger son wanted to tell Cain, her older son, the killer. Nor do we know, nor will we ever know, what she told his victim, Abel. I like this poem for it illustrates in so many ways many of our fears, almost all our endeavors, what we who were there in the sealed wagon, what we so want to say, will remain unsaid. Now, preliminary remark. It is very special for me to be here tonight with you. It's special because in this room, I think in this room we have had for the last few days extraordinary minds and memories. Rarely have so many men and women of such talent, of such commitment, of such knowledge with regard to the period of all periods being together. Historians, psychologists, writers, teachers, educators, the best, have been here to listen to one another and to say things that you must hear. And we hope that you will have heard them. But I am not sure that the information you received has become knowledge, for that is the problem. How does information become knowledge? Information you have read in newspapers. Knowledge you can receive only from these colleagues of mine, for they have devoted their lives for the study of evil, and also, therefore, for the study of what can fight evil, what can overcome evil, and perhaps what can transcend evil. So for me, therefore, it is very special to be one of them, as probably their older brother, their older friend, and say certain things which will only be added to what they have said already. 40 years ago, it's 40 years that I have been involved in this effort. I have written my first book 40 years ago. It appeared in 1956 in Argentina, because in Argentina they had a Yiddish publishing society. It was called in Yiddish "Und die Welt hat geschwiegen," and the world was silent. It was written 10 years after I was liberated. For 10 years I kept totally silent about that period. And I wrote it, and then I decided the time had come to publish it. Nobody wanted it after the Yiddish publication. Problems, but that's a different story. Every writer has problems. Every writer has problems with publishers. So did I. We know that. However, in Yiddish it was published, and for me it was enough. I felt I have done my duty. I have said what I wanted to say, as poorly as I can, but I have said it. Life being what it is, some of you may know that then I met a great writer in France, Mauriac. He pushed me to translate it, to do something, and finally the book was published with very, very many difficulties. Nobody wanted the book, neither in France nor here. Finally, when it was published, nobody read it. And when it was read, nobody spoke about it. It was a very interesting period in my life. Then, 40 years later, here I am. And the time has come, therefore, to what we call proceed and do a cheshbon hanefesh, meaning take stock. What happened since? And this is really the topic of your colloquium here. Ethics after the Holocaust. Has the world become more ethical as a result of our testimony? Has the world improved? Has humankind chosen a different path, leading to salvation, to redemption, rather than to murder and forgetfulness? Ethics after the Holocaust, there are two words in it at least that need some kind of explanation, or at least exploration. First of all, let's say Holocaust. I confess that I feel very ambiguous and ambivalent about this word, although I was among the first who used it by accident to describe this period. I am not satisfied with it. I think it's the wrong word. I did it because I was working then on an essay on the Akedah, on the binding of Isaac. Again, some of you may know I love biblical study, biblical exploration. This is my love. And I was doing that essay, and there the term is when God said to Abraham, go and bring me your only son, the one that you love, and so forth, le'olah, as a burnt offering. And the word burnt offering, not offering, but rather burnt, appealed to me. It's burnt. What is the symbol of our tragedy, if not fire? Fire. The ultimate fire. Burnt offering means total burn. Nothing remains except the ashes. And here again, it fit the memory of that period. I don't like it for two reasons. First, because it has a religious implication, as if it were the will of God to receive these 6 million offerings. I cannot accept that, because if God is someone who wants 6 million souls, I don't know. I'm afraid to know. The other reason I don't like it is because it became too diluted. Everything now is a Holocaust. There was a kind of a murderer who killed a few years ago, a certain Dalberg, I think. I don't remember how many, 15 or 20 people. All the headlines were the Holocaust. There was a fire in Harlem once, the Holocaust. And the dilution disturbs me, because for some of us, that period is a sacred period. Sacred because of the impact, of the magnitude, and of the desire of the killer to kill, and of the victim to live. Are there other words? In Israel, there is a word called Shoah. That is a word in Israel. I don't like that word either. I don't like it simply because the word Shoah appears in the Israeli press already in 1939-40, about pogroms. Now, if a pogrom is Shoah, this cannot be Shoah. However, what Israel does is all right with me, so we accept it. Then the word really that we used, we Jews, Yiddish-speaking mainly, were Churban. When Jews after the war would meet, they would ask each other, where did you spend the Churban, the years of the Churban? And that somehow appealed to me because it placed the event in history. There was a first destruction, first Churban of the temple, the second destruction of the temple, and this was a kind of third destruction of a temple. Now, why is it not good? Because it is really, it's different even, different in everything from the first destruction and the second destruction. There, the temple was destroyed, yes. Many people were killed, yes, but not like that. For the first time in history, human beings in a strange, crazy laboratory, which I'm sure you have heard from my friend Raoul Hilberg, a very strange mind. They made experiments on life and death, and they, for the first time, reduced human beings to objects. Never happened before. Secondly, never before have our victims endured the shame of not being buried. For a person to be buried is a kind of the elementary human right, so to speak. You know, in the time of Hadrian and then Beitar, some 1900 years ago, when the last Jews in Bar Kokhba fought against the Romans then, wanting to punish the Jewish people in Judea, forbade the burial of the victims. And for many days, maybe a few weeks, they were lying in the streets. When finally the decree was revoked, our sages, who composed our prayers, composed the prayer that we call Hatov v'Hameitiv, which we use in our grace, when we say grace, meaning, blessed be thou God who is good, and to make other people be good. We were so grateful that our dead could be buried, that this special prayer was invented. Big deal. Such a prayer. But we used it because so important was for our tradition, for our history, to have people buried. For the first time, it didn't happen. It didn't happen because, you know their fate. They were burned, and the ashes are still there. Those that were not dispersed in the river, in Birkenau, are still there. I may come back to it in a moment. So therefore, Holocaust is a problem. But why shouldn't it be? I use all kinds of words. I say event with a capital E. I say tragedy, capital T. I try my best, and I'm not happy. I don't want to be happy. Now comes the word ethics. What is ethics? Usually we would say ethics is, of course, a moral attitude, a moral commitment. But ethics has something to do, we think, with God. God wants men or women to be kind to one another. And there is a little bit of truth in it, but only a little bit. In Hebrew, it comes from the word musar, which means to transmit. The ethical command is to transmit. What I receive, I must transmit. I received kindness, I must give kindness. I received the lesson, I must share the lesson. Which means the second derivative of the word is masorah, tradition. I must transmit the tradition. I must remain faithful to a tradition. So therefore we saw that ethics means that the tradition. In truth, when we explore the word and the meaning of the word deeper, we realize ethics has almost nothing to do with my relation to God. It has exclusively to do with my relation to you. Which means, if I am good to my fellow human beings, I am an ethical person. Even if I deny God. If I am not kind, if I am not human to my fellow human beings, then I'm an unethical person. Which means I deny God by being in a position of denying my fellow human being. Therefore, in Hebrew, for instance, you should know, there is no word for atheist. You don't know how to, if you want to say, I am an atheist, you don't know how to say it. And we always believed that was God's way of punishing you. You don't want to believe in me? Go ahead. But you won't have a word for it. Now, colloquially, there is a term for it. The term is kofer be'ikar, someone who denies the essential. Kofer be'ikar is the equivalent for an atheist. However, I went through the entire Talmudic sources with my friend and teacher, the late Shaul Lieberman. And each time the term kofer be'ikar appears, it never deals with man's relations to God, only with my relations to human beings again. Which proves that ethics have to do with human relations, not with divinity and humanity. God is a different problem. He can take care of himself and of it and so forth. We cannot. We need one another. For we are not alone in the world. God alone is alone. We must never be alone. Which brings us, in a way, tangentially. I know that you had so many great scholars here about Rosenzweig and Levinas. I cannot not contribute at least one word. Rosenzweig is a great philosopher, together with Hermann Cohen, of the great philosophers in Germany. And I didn't know him. He died, I think, long ago, before I even knew what the word philosophy meant. But I knew Levinas. I like Rosenzweig's The Star of Redemption. I like the way he returned to Judaism, because it's a beautiful story in addition to the philosophy. Levinas I knew, and Levinas and I had the same teacher, Shoshani. And those of you who had maybe occasion to read some of my pages know that I'm speaking about him a lot. Levinas, as you know, discovered or invented a kind of ethical philosophy called l'altérité in French, which means the otherness. The otherness. It is the other that matters. I define myself not towards my own self, but towards the other. The face of the other, the soul of the other, the destiny of the other, always the other. Now again, when I have a question, I always go back to the original Hebrew. What does it mean in Levinas? It means responsibility. Responsibility in Hebrew is achrayut. It comes from the word, from many words. One of them is, let's say, acher, the other. Responsibility means to be responsible for the other. And as he said, quoting our teacher Shoshani, we are all responsible for one another, and everybody must say, and I more so. Not like, more so. Then comes the word in acher, the other, in ichur, late. Don't come to the other too late. If he needs you, do it right away. If you want to be you, you must absolutely do something for the other immediately. So you see, now we are almost in the subject. Responsibility, ethics, and after the Holocaust. Question: are we really after the Holocaust? Yes, it ended in 1945. Are we after? Psychiatrists know, because a study has been made, a tortured person remains tortured his entire life, or her entire life. The same is true of a person who went through this experience. He or she who went through Auschwitz somehow remained in Auschwitz all his or her life. Or Auschwitz may remain in him or in her. Look, I met some students at Hillel today, and a brilliant young student named Chris asked me certain questions. I'll try to answer. See, I remember. Huh? That is one of the things that we must remember. There are people who went through the experience, and they appear to you as happy, and they should be happy. They appear to you as content, even as if they had already made peace with themselves. The real reason is they have not. Doesn't matter. In spite of what they feel, they want to become a source of goodness a source of help to those who did not go through. Meaning, we believed, and in a way we still do, with difficulty, that if we could tell the story properly, adequately, creatively, humanly, we would prevent others not from having the same experience, but from have similar tragedies, other injustices, and so forth. For I believe the Holocaust is a unique event. It is a unique experience. It is a unique tragedy. I think it's a Jewish tragedy with universal implications and applications. It doesn't mean that others didn't suffer. Others did suffer. There were many others who suffered. There were the people from Russia, the Slavs, who were sentenced to become slaves, to be reduced to slavery. There were the gypsies. There were all kinds of others. However, we should never compare. It has, therefore, it's a Jewish tragedy. It was meant to destroy the entire Jewish people. In the Wannsee conference, when they decided on the final solution, the only people they spoke about was the Jewish people, not the others. Furthermore, at that point they spoke about 11 million Jews. And why 11 million? They said 6 million in Europe. Then they quoted America and Mexico, I don't even which, all the other lands. They wanted to go after every single Jew, to the last Jew. What are the implications? The implications are, I believe, that whenever a community is marked for persecution, others are affected as well. We no longer can believe that it's possible to say this community or this group or this society can be done with and nothing will happen. Things happen. Because it's a result of hate. Hate is contagious. Hate is like a cancer cell. It moves from limb to limb until it invades the whole body. And then it becomes like poison. It goes from one person to another and simply can destroy the entire community of all communities. That is something we must remember after the Holocaust. The Holocaust, therefore, affected everything because it happened. I don't think it will happen again, because I believe it's unique. The moment we start saying it's not unique, that it can happen, then it will. We have seen in history, in our own lifetime, that whatever can happen, happens. And therefore, with all my being, with every fiber in my being, I plead always with those who are occasionally my students or my readers, please, this must be a unique event. That doesn't mean, again, that others don't suffer or didn't suffer. Suppose I was asked so much about today, Bosnia and so forth. Look, in Bosnia there were massacres, mass murder. These are very strong words, awful words. Why do we need to compare right away? We have in our vocabulary enough terms, enough concepts, enough notions about horrible injustices committed against men and women because of their color of the skin, because of their ethnic origin, because of their religious affiliation. But whatever happened to our people, we didn't want it. We are not saying it with pride. We are saying it with sadness. Happened to our people alone. Now, why did it happen? Again, I'm sure you have heard it. Any one of those who spoke here, I'm sure touched upon this. Why did it happen? I don't know why. anti-Semitism alone is not the only answer. It's impossible, because we had anti-Semitism for 2,000 years at least. I have quotes here from the Roman times, the Roman orators, Tacitus, Cicero. They had anti-Semitic slogans that you cannot believe they said them, and they did. Throughout the ages, we had anti-Semitism. We never had that. Why now? I don't know, but nor do I know why. For the first time, there was no real intervention to save the victims. And there again, we speak about it so often with heartbreak. I know that the United States has been founded on a spirit of generosity and kindness towards the other. The refugees, the victims from everywhere came to America. Thank God for America. I know, therefore, that Roosevelt, after all, waged war, organized America and its allies to wage war against Hitler and fascism. But the parallel history of the Jewish victims must also be taken into account. As you heard David quoting me, it is true. I, to this day, cannot understand why nothing was done simply to save Jews. Oh, you know, presidents, we interviewed, all of us, we interviewed so many people in power. Why didn't they? Here they say it was impossible because the distances, nonsense. There were planes that bombed the factories near Auschwitz. Why didn't they bomb the tracks going to Auschwitz? Then I asked the Russian general, when we were together in '79, the man who was in charge of liberating Auschwitz, the man Petrenko. We spent hours with him in Moscow, and I asked him, why didn't you? It was for you, there's no excuse. They were 20 kilometers away from Auschwitz. For them to take a plane and bomb was nothing. Before that, let's say in September, they were 200 kilometers away. I don't know why. That is one of the mysteries, the painful, agonizing mysteries that we confront whenever we study that period. What else don't we know? I must tell you that there are certain events that I speak with anger in my memoir because they deal with my own people. The Jewish leadership in America was not up to its duties. I don't know how to explain it to you because I have no explanation. Maybe they believed too much in Roosevelt. That's what they told me always. But when they heard the news, and they heard the news that you couldn't dispute, indisputable, about the liquidation of one ghetto, more and more, and the books came out. A book about Treblinka by a certain Yankel Virnik came out in 1944. It was published in New York in 1944, while the Hungarian Jews were being shipped to Auschwitz. It was there. It was it came to New York. This is he was a man, a carpenter, who built the gas chambers. And I remember his book almost by heart. When he says, I am the one who built, he was exaggerating naturally because he was in pain. He said, I am the one who built the death chambers for my people. Because he was the carpenter building the gas chambers. And then he said, I wonder whether I shall be ever capable of laughing again. Another man in the Sonderkommando in Birkenau, named Zalman Gradowski, also wrote a chronicle, and he said something else. He said, I wonder whether I shall ever be capable of weeping again. And that is worse than the fall. It was known. Yankel Virnik escaped from Treblinka during the uprising. And he wrote this book, and nothing happened. That is part of our pain, that we have to say such terrible things against people, about people who I know were decent people, were committed human beings, committed to our people, committed to America. They were leaders in the community. But there was a blindness. Maybe winds of madness were blowing in history. It happens occasionally that history is being traversed by winds of madness. Take the Crusades. What were the Crusades if not madness? Total madness. The Inquisition in Spain, madness. And we don't even know why. Simply it's winds of madness. Maybe madness prevailed and everybody was blind. Their heart was stone. Now, what about ethics? What was the ethical attitude during those periods of time? The ethical attitude simply was to say no. Now we know again from our historians, it was possible to say no, even inside Germany, inside Poland and everywhere. I should have told you that it was possible to say, no, I will not go and kill Jews. And nothing would happen to that person. All that could happen was to be sent to the Russian front. It was possible for a civilian person who lived in a house to open the door and pull in a child. You were in Kiev near Babi Yar. Babi Yar, when I came to Babi Yar in '65, I thought it was far away, far away. Babi Yar was in Kiev, the suburb of Kiev. And all the Jews had to go through a street, a very narrow street. The street was inhabited. And from that street, literally, they went to the ravine, to Babi Yar. I asked the president of the Ukraine, who was then Kravchuk, I said to him, tell me, how many doors opened to pull in a child? How many windows were opened to throw something up and say, come, hide? Not one. From Babi Yar, there were a few who escaped because they were all shot. Some were only wounded, covered by the other bodies. 5, I think, escaped. I think so, 5. I met one woman when I was in Kiev for the first time, and she was totally insane. And then I heard about another man who escaped like that. He was naked because they undressed the victims. And he, at night, managed to climb out, run to the next village, knocked at the door, and the peasant opened, a woman. And he said, let me in. And she said, no, you are a Jew. And he had the presence of mind to say something brilliant. He said, I am Christ. I just came down from the cross. and she took him in. How many did take in Jews? Didn't. We have righteous Gentiles and we are eternally grateful to them. But so few, so few. So these are the questions that I had when I wrote my first book, 40 years ago. I still have them when I published my latest book. I have not written much about that period. I couldn't. As I couldn't teach that period. I couldn't. For 2 years when I began my academic career, there were very few who taught. So I had to. But afterwards, thank God, we have marvelous teachers, young, great teachers, and not so young, my age, but they are great, and I don't have to do it. I cannot. In the beginning, I realized one day that most of my students are children of survivors. Because the parents didn't talk to them, they came to me, and I became a kind of surrogate father. And you cannot imagine, you can imagine, what it meant teaching Ringelblum, what it meant teaching the Chronicles of Birkenau. When we ended the class, the students remained sitting with their heads in their hands. They simply couldn't leave the Warsaw Ghetto and go to 101 biology. They couldn't. So I stayed with them for hours. That's why I tell you, I couldn't bear it, I couldn't teach it. I couldn't write about it. That's why I wrote about the Bible, about the Talmud, about Hasidism. What didn't I write about? In order not to write about that, I was afraid of using the wrong words. Believe me, I'm telling you the truth. Out of fear, I was afraid of not being capable of writing what I must write, the truth. Couldn't. Now, what else did we learn? We spoke about today at the table with friends about the intellectuals. How come that the killers were recruited not necessarily among the low-ranking thieves and murderers? They were, by the way, they were in jail, then they became capos in the concentration camps. But intellectuals, the Einsatzkommandos had PhDs. The officers had PhDs. And in my mind, it doesn't work. I always believed education is a shield against certain things. You cannot do if you have read Plato. You cannot do certain things if you have appreciated Bach. You cannot. What is civilization if not a limit beyond which you cannot go? What is religion if not that limit? What is culture if not that limit? A cultured person cannot do that. You cannot go beyond. And they did. And I told them today, I opened once the Jewish encyclopedia, the modern Encyclopedia Judaica, and I found an entry about Shimon Dubnov, who was one of the great historians that we had. You know, we didn't fare too well with historians until the 19th century. The only one that was a historian was Flavius, and he wasn't so, he wasn't such a... It took 20 centuries to bring him back into history, because he was a Roman. Gretz, I didn't like him because he was anti-Hasidic. He was a great historian, but anti-Hasidic. Dubnov was a Hasid. I liked him. And then I saw the entry saying there, Dubnov was, he was a professor here and there, and then he was in Riga, the Riga ghetto, and he was killed, I think, the 7th of December 1941, by a former pupil he had in Germany. I was intrigued, and I began working on it. And it took me months and months to figure the whole thing out. And indeed, Dubnov was in Germany. He was a professor, and he had many students. And one of his students, named, I think, Siebert, is sure, maybe Frank, and Siebert became the commandant of the Gestapo in Riga, where he was in the ghetto. And Siebert heard about Dubnov. He came to see him often, taunting him. So, professor, you taught me everything about humanity. Do you still believe in humanity? And Dubnov would say, yes, I do. How can you, he said. I just came back from the forest, from, I think, Romboli, and I killed or ordered the killing of 565 people. And Dubnov would say, take out his pen and say, how many did you say? He was a historian. He had to write down. And again, he would come back and back and back. Same. Then came December 1941, and was one liquidation of the ghetto. Dubnov was there next to the rabbi of Riga. Siebert came to him. Do you still believe? Yes, I do. I'm going to kill you. Do you still believe? He said, yes, I do. Killed him. We are told the last words of Dubnov was to other Jews. He said, schreib du was schreib, meaning write everything, whatever you see here. They were all going to die. But he said, go on writing. So we are after the Holocaust, but not entirely. But what remains of that period is a duty, first of all, to remember. That is the paramount obligation, not only of us, but of all of you who listen to us. The other obligation, I would say, is the ethical obligation. We must be responsible for each other. Does it mean I'm responsible for the murderer too? Which means if the murderer is a murderer, does it mean that something is wrong with me, with us, with education, with social order, with the law? What I do know is that when people suffer, I must be on their side. So must you. Does it mean I must only help the Jews? David, you read from my Nobel address. In my Nobel address, I said to the committee and to all those, it was some ceremony, don't give me this award under false pretenses. I'm a Jew. My priorities are Jewish priorities. Jewish fears, Jewish trials, Jewish experiences. These are my priorities. However, they are not exclusive. I must help the Jewish people because of our history, because I was born a Jew, and I assume my Jewishness as fully as I can. But that doesn't mean that when people are killed in Cambodia, I can remain indifferent. I cannot. I must go and witness, or in Bosnia, or anywhere. In other words, and here I must give you my credo, I hope you will understand it. I do not believe that the Jewish people is superior to any other people, nor is it inferior. I do not believe that the Jewish religion is superior to any other religion, nor is it inferior. But I believe, and I must say, I am a Jew, and therefore the Jewish history, Jewish tradition, Jewish memory are mine. It is from my Jewishness that I can aspire to transcend this condition and give something to others as well. In other words, the more Jewish the Jew, the more universal the Jew. I will never believe that I have to convert all people to my religion or to my tradition to make this world into a good world. We are told, even when the Messiah will come, all people will not be Jews. Jews will be simply better Jews, and people will be better people, each in his or her own tradition and culture and civilization and condition. But I say about my Jewishness, the Catholic has absolutely the right to say about his or her Catholicism, the Protestant about Luther or Calvin, the Buddhist about Buddha and the Gitas and the Upanishads, and the Muslim about Islam. I am not better than they, nor am I worse than they. It is from within that I can do what I want to do, to behave as a Jew and therefore as a human being. If I have to deny my Jewishness in order to speak to others and be heard by others, I would never do it. I am not going to lie. I am not going to give you my truth as a lie. No. You accept me for what I am, and I will accept you for what you are, anyone, provided, therefore, that this understanding exists, and this, call it tolerance, call it humanism, must exist for us all to prevail, and that is the ethical legacy that we must receive and communicate after Auschwitz. In conclusion, I'll tell you a story before asking the questions. It's about, all this. Martin Buber, somebody should have actually had Rosenzweig Buber and Levinas. Martin Buber came to an ecumenic gathering, and there were many, of course, many theologians, hundreds and hundreds of all denominations. And he spoke to the Christians and he said, look, actually between you and me, what is the difference? It's very simple. All of us believe in the Messiah. You believe he came already and he left. I believe he hasn't come yet. So it's very simple. Let's wait together. Wait. And he said, when he will come, we will ask him, have you been here before? And Buber said, at that point, at that moment, I hope I will be next to him. I will whisper in his ear, please, for heaven's sake, don't answer.
We'll now take questions, so please pass them to the aisles and bring them forward. The first question I have is, when you look to the world today, do you think we've learned anything? Do you see hope?
Do I see hope? I see hope when I see young people, when I see children. And there too, I think we can learn something from those who were our teachers. Really. Every survivor is our teacher. That after the war, the first thing they did in the DP camps, they got married. And you would believe, why? Why did they do that? Didn't they know that having children, Jewish children, is dangerous in the world? Didn't they know that to be a family is dangerous? Nevertheless, they had children in all the DP camps immediately. Today, we must, I'll quote Camus, in a world of unhappiness, we must create happiness.
How do we keep the Shoah as a unique event for our future? How can we teach about the disaster after your generation is gone without making it seem possible again?
Look, we are not immortal, and for us, every day is a day of grace. You know, no one really is as capable of gratitude as a survivor is. Because we know that everything that happens to us now is an offering and a gift. What will happen? I think it was you, Raoul, you spoke about it, that this tragedy is the most documented in history. There will be documents in the millions. In the millions. There are those that haven't even been discovered, which I hear now about in Russia. There will be in the millions. And later on, first of all, the children of survivors will continue. That we see they want so much now to take on the work. They will continue. And it's true, it's not the same thing when a person says, I was there. It means something. But when a son or a daughter will say, my father was there, my mother was there, it also means something. What it really means, those who listen to a witness become witnesses. And therefore the chain can continue and must continue and will.
Please comment on Anne Frank's statement that all people are truly good at heart. Do you believe this is true?
I wish I could believe in that. I don't really, no. Otherwise, then how can I explain really what happened? I cannot explain. Were they good at heart? What do you mean? Those who killed, the killers, were good at heart? Not all people are good at heart. Some are not. I hope that many are, but those who did those crimes, I've always asked about that, but forgiving. Why not forgive them? I will not forgive them. I cannot forgive them. Those who killed Jewish children or Jewish men and women just like that, why should I forgive them? Did they ask me for forgiveness? They didn't even ask. And even if they asked, who am I to say I forgive? Just to say that they were good at heart, but poor killer, something happened to him, you know. He was taken by the Nazi party. He was seduced by Hitler. That's an answer. I think they were not good. Which means, if ever we would say that some people were evil, not only their acts were evil, but they were evil, I must say they were evil. It's against everything I believe in. For I believe really that human beings are not evil. They can do evil, but they are not. In this case, everything is exceptional, and therefore they were evil.
A Holocaust denier comes to town. What should be the response of the organized Jewish community and other citizens? A nonviolent rally? To ignore them? What?
We have here Deborah. She will give you the answer. But my personal attitude is don't answer. Not them, anyway. In 1975, I published a book called The Jew Today, and there I have a chapter. I think Deborah was too young then to write about it, and I wrote about that, about the deniers. They try to provoke me wherever I go, and you too. Wherever you go, they provoke you probably. During the Nobel ceremony, believe me, during the Nobel ceremony, outside they were having a demonstration, deniers who came from all over Europe. Where did they get the money? Who gave them the tickets? Who arranged the logistics, hotels, planes? They are well organized, and they are well financed. I don't know the resources, where do they come from? We should be very careful, but nevertheless, I would never grant them the dignity of a debate. Never. They don't deserve it. These people are morally ugly. And I've said it many times. I know how to fight injustice. Believe me, I do. I try. I don't know how to fight ugliness. Moral ugliness is too ugly. Therefore, I would say these people are morally sick. Just as there are other people who are mentally sick, they are morally sick. And I would simply ignore them totally. I would work harder, positively, with students, with children, with everybody, but not in relation to them. They may ask the question 1,000 times, and they may shout 1,000 times, they may write 1,000 pamphlets. It should be treated as nothing.
How do we fight against indifference in our own lives?
By participating. The moment you become involved in another person's life, you are no longer indifferent. Indifference is always self-centered. It's only you who count, nobody else does. And it's really so easy. You are young, fall in love. You are older, still fall in love. Or really, today there are so many human rights abuses. Homeless in the street, prisoners of conscience in China, the Tibetan people who are occupied and suffering, and what's happened, anti-Semitism in Russia. Look, there are so many causes today, and still racism in our own country. Take a stand, and you won't be indifferent.
Did you believe in God while you were in the camps? If not, when did you start believing again?
Oh, it always comes. Look, I think I mentioned it. I come from such a religious background. For me, therefore, I was too young to question the humanity of man. It wasn't my problem, really. My question was God. I believed in God. I come from a family, a dynasty of believers. According to our legend, might have been a legend, we go back to Rashi. It's a long, long, long way back to Rashi. And there. So for me, I was too religious to think about something else. I came to Birkenau. I came in my bag. I had half of my bag was for religious things, my tefillin, my prayer books, other books, Talmud, not so much food or anything else or clothing. In the camp, of course, I had a protest, but after the protest, I went back to prayer, which means really I continue protesting. I didn't stop. My faith is wounded, as everything else is. But I don't want to stop it. I don't want to be the last in that line to say, okay, Mr. God, I divorce you, and finish. I don't want to be that. So also I think of my contemporaries. What will my denial of God bring you if I deny God? I must do something. I must remain within a framework, within a ritual. And therefore, I say every day, Shema Yisrael. I say every day, I pray. Yes, I do pray. Sometimes I pray against God, but I pray.
Do you have any suggestions on how Christians can begin to confront and face their complicity in the horror?
I don't have to give advice to Christians, but may I simply remind some of you, again, when I was young, I had nothing to do with Christianity. I was afraid of the priest. If I saw a priest in the street, I would change sidewalks. I was afraid. I was afraid of the church. Changed after the war. Naturally it changed. Now I realize that I can never pass a collective judgment. There are good people in the church, there are not so good people in the church. There are good people outside the church and not so good people outside the church. However, I would like really to mention a few things here. For it should be really something of a priority to those who believe in the church, who are members of the church, and maybe us Jews as well. A few years ago, there was a scandal all over the world because of a convent in Birkenau. And there was a scandal, people went to the Pope, years and years, fight. Our friends in Christianity really helped, and they also wrote and petitions. We went to everywhere. Finally, the convent, the nuns moved, and they went elsewhere, the Carmelite nuns. What's happening today is worse. In Birkenau, near a certain bunker where the Hungarian Jews were gassed, I saw them. 10 to 12 immense, gigantic crosses. Crosses. And some of them embrace the Magen David, the Star of David. What is happening? To bring crosses there, where the ashes are still there, and the ashes are our cemeteries. I don't understand it. I am outraged by that. Why did I do it? It's 2 years already. I went back last year simply to see if they were there. I took pictures. They're there. I tried, believe me, I tried everything. I tried to authorities, to Jewish organizations. Nothing doing. They're still there. One. Those of you who read maybe my night, most of my staying in Auschwitz was in Buna, near Auschwitz. Auschwitz III it was called. I went there. I wanted to see it. I haven't seen it. Nothing to see. They destroyed the camp totally, and they built houses instead. There's a little plaque saying here 30,000 or 32,000 people were. I was wondering where. I didn't see the camp. Where was it? Why did they destroy it and what happened? While I was there with an interpreter, 2 men came across in the street. We stopped them. One of them was a priest who just came back from a mission in Africa, and he spoke English. I said, "Sir, do you know this place?" He said, "Of course, I lived here." "Where did you live?" He said, "There." That's straight. I said, "Where was the camp?" He said, "There." I said, "Wait a second. Where?" He said, "There. The barbed wire was there. Maybe like from here to the door." "And you could see what was happening?" He said, "Of course I could see." I said, "Describe me a day." He gave me a description of a day. In the morning we heard the gong, what we call the bell. We heard the Appellplatz, we heard the music. I said, "You could see from your window in the camp?" He said, "I'm telling you." I said, do you remember the hanging? He said, I remember the hanging. Wait a minute. This was Auschwitz. And he was there. The entire street again was inhabited. I said, did you have breakfast in the morning? He said, yes, we had breakfast in the morning. We went on going, we went to church, we did. Something didn't fit. It's wrong. Third thing. From Auschwitz we went to Buchenwald. We spoke of Buchenwald. And Buchenwald was a political camp. It was better than other camps. There was no gas chamber, it was much better. It was political. Therefore it was actually led by the political prisoners, mainly by communists. I went to see it because there was a ceremony and I was thinking to go to that ceremony or not. I want to see it first. Then there was a small camp called the little camp, the Kleiner Lager. We, Jews from Auschwitz, mainly those who came already sick and tired and broken, they were put there. The worst part was there. People died of hunger, of dysentery. My father died there. There. I was looking for it. It wasn't there. They destroyed it and planted trees. Not even a plaque saying here there was a camp. Nothing. Then I heard something even worse. They were thinking about having a memorial for the victims of the Nazis there. But since Buchenwald became a prison for Nazis after the war, they wanted to erect a memorial for the German victims of the Russians, together with the other memorial. That is what frightens me. With all our books and all our studies, still going on, things like that. And therefore the title After the Holocaust? What after? Maybe it's finished altogether. If they continue like that, I think our work will be impossible or unbearably harder. Here I would say, those of you who are our friends in Christianity, please, maybe you do something. Remove the crosses, first of all. Can't you understand that the cross for you is something, of course, a symbol of love, not for us. Don't feel hurt. For us, the cross for so many centuries, a symbol of suffering. But there, in Auschwitz, in Birkenau, inside I'm burning, really. Because I'm thinking of those people who were burned there. These were our families. The cross. It's shameful.
My father's father was an officer in the Nazi army. In context of what it means for me to be a German and to be human, this raises painful questions. Today my question is it possible for me to look at my grandfather who was morally sick as healed or capable of healing, or can he not redeem himself?
You're asking me a question I don't know. Did he participate in the killings? I don't know. Does he know? Look, I must tell you, children, the German children, I have such empathy for them because I know such cases. I got such letters. I met some students. A student came up to me once and he said, he discovered, he said, what to do? He said, he discovered that his father was a colonel in the SS. And that happened 5 years earlier. And since that day he left his home, he didn't go back. And he wept. What can he do? What could I do except trying to console him? Because I have nothing against the German youngsters who were born after the war. On the contrary, we should try and help them because they also suffer now. Because what their fathers have done, they have actually made suffer their own children. Not only did they inflict suffering on us, they inflicted suffering for generations of children, of German children. And therefore, they are good. Some of them are so good. They are committed to fight fascism, anti-Semitism. They are there. My students, I had students from Germany. They are good. And I applaud them. I embrace them.
Do Jews have a greater responsibility than others to oppose acts of genocide?
Look, it's an individual responsibility. I'm not saying the Jews have a greater responsibility, or everybody has a greater responsibility. Again, every single human being who wants to remain human must have a greater responsibility to save other people from suffering, from humiliation, and from death.
How do we teach our children about the Holocaust without making them feel guilty?
Why should they feel guilty? Children feel guilty for what? Oh no. I think we should teach our children because it's impossible to have an education without that chapter. Therefore, we spoke about it, President Fromeyer, that it's so important here in this university too. You need it. You cannot have an education, a higher education, Jewish or non-Jewish, without having a chair or courses on the Holocaust, Jewish history, and so forth. Can you have? You cannot. So therefore, children should not feel guilty. They should simply feel more learned, more awake. Tell me, is there a better way to sensitize young children than to teach them that period in history? And what is education if not to sensitize? What is art if not sensitizing? What is religion if not sensitizing? And this particular event is, I don't know of any other that could sensitize us, everybody, deeper, better.
How can a child of a survivor reconcile the anger and the bitterness passed on while wanting to still believe in Judaism?
What would he believe in? I don't know anything else.
Harold Kushner presents a choice between an all-powerful and an all-loving God. He contends if God is both, the Holocaust could not have happened. How do you respond to Kushner?
I don't respond. What can I say there, really?
The phenomena of neighbors killing neighbors has manifested itself in Bosnia again as it did in the Holocaust. Can you elaborate on how this influences your studies of ethics after the Holocaust?
My studies, my work. I study what I always studied. It's my work. I went to Bosnia. When it happened, I felt I had to go and see, especially when at that time the media spoke about Auschwitz in Bosnia. And I felt, when I hear Auschwitz in Bosnia, I cannot stay home. I must go and see. Is it true? It wasn't true. The media, you know, it's a catchword, a good word, Auschwitz in Bosnia. Wasn't true. However, the atrocities committed there were horrendous. What did we do? Look, we tried to prevail upon our leaders to intervene. In France, England, the United Nations, here, whomever we know, we tried to prevail upon them. It didn't work for a while. Now I think it works. The hatred there, what worried me there really, I always believed that memory is a shield against hatred. There it was the opposite. It's because they remembered that they hated more. Sometimes I heard absurd things, but for them it was real. I would ask, let's say, a man, why do you hate their neighbor there? What do you mean by hate? 126 years ago, he said, my grandfather, 126 years ago. They remembered as if it happened now. I hope now, I really hope now that the Dayton agreements will continue and they will stay and this stupid bloodshed will end there. Sarajevo was such a beautiful city. You know, really Sarajevo. I was walking in Sarajevo with the president of Bosnia, Izetbegovic, and at one point he said, you see this place? This is where the First World War began. You remember when the man Gabriel Principe fired on the Archduke of Austria-Hungary? I said, Mr. President, please, I don't want the Third World War to begin there, you know. But you think about it, the snipers, you know, why? You don't even know why they kill each other. And then you had Karadzic, who is a madman. Mladic, they live with a cult of death. They want to kill. Well, it's very hard to be an optimist. But you know what Camus said? Camus said something very beautiful. He said, the choice is between being a weeping optimist or a smiling pessimist. William, one more, all right?
Could you speak of what conditions cultivate a climate of tolerance in the present era of reemergence of ethnic strife the world over?
I didn't get the question.
Let's try again. Could you speak of what conditions cultivate a climate of tolerance?
Oh. How to create tolerance? By being tolerant. You begin at home. You begin with yourself. That is really easy. You begin somewhere, and you are the example. One and one and one and one, and then somehow all of a sudden you realize that some are more tolerant than others. In conclusion, what does it all really mean? Ethics after the Holocaust also means to wager on man's humanity rather than on his or her inhumanity. It is to wager on man's right to have faith and also on his right not to have faith. We must respect both. It is to wager on, let's say, on life rather than on death. Again, it is, I believe, to wager on the fact that 1 minute before I die, I am still immortal. I thank you.
This concludes the University of Oregon's conference, Ethics After the Holocaust. Our thanks to the hundreds of people who shared their vision, time, and advice, helping us plan this conference and make it happen. We would also like to thank the organizations and individuals who gave us the financial support we needed. Thank you for coming, and thank you for caring. Good evening.